the video. Today I'm going to be doing the first video in the series of my L2 project. I'm going to be building a Darkstar 3 from Wildman. Right now I have a dry fit of the parts here and two of the fins put into the fin can there. So I was hoping to have started this build a little bit earlier when I first got the parts in the mail, but I realized that it was very boring and it was a lot of storage on my phone to record kind of nothing. Basically the process that has already taken place is I got the parts in the mail and I took them into my backyard and I washed them off with some soap and the hose, and I scrubbed them all around to try and get as much of the motor grease off as I could. And then I popped them down into my bathtub for about 4 or 5 hours with some soapy water. Stirred around every now and then to continue to try and get more of the motor grease off. And then I sat it down here. And then I was going to start the video there. But my problem was that I had a RA54L2. This is the wrong motor retainer. I don't know why I bought this one. It's not the one that's listed on Wildman's website for the rocket kit itself. That would be the RA54P. That's the motor retainer that I now have. But I have that one now too. So I'll just save it for the next kit I end up building that can use one of those. I have a couple options that I'm interested in. But once I got the 54P in the mail, I was able to take the motor tube. I measured out roughly where all of the centering rings are supposed to go based off of the length of the fins and the depth of the motor retainer and how far it's supposed to slot onto the tube, and where the fins go in the rocket body. And I sanded down the very end of that tube just enough so that way the motor retainer can fit on and fit flush and sort of spin around so it sits comfy, but it won't fall off. I didn't remove too much material, I don't think. And after doing that, I realized it was really boring to watch me say, I sanded this part and it wasn't enough, so I sanded it some more, and then it still wasn't enough, so I sanded it some more, and then it was right. And that would have made a really boring video. So I'm just going to start the process today. This is going to be the third high-powered rocket that I've done. I've done a small rocket, a little Estes Big Bertha kit. And then the first rocket that I did was my Dozer 1 here. This is an Apogee Zephyr kit that I bought and put together. And I flew twice. And then after that, I did my Baja Blast Off, which I have over here. And so this rocket kit is a 3-inch rocket, same 38mm motor mount. It's a little gross right now. Don't worry about it. But another 3-inch rocket. This is all scratch build. I cut the fins myself. I cut the fin slots myself into through the wall fins. I did a cluster of 2 parachutes, which I thought was pretty fun and worked pretty well. Both deployed and it came down at a reasonable speed, so I was very happy with this launch. I did relatively alright documentation for the Dozer 1 here in the UWT same Discord server. Anybody there, they can see my build, and I hope that I told them enough about how I did it, because we've had a ton of other people do Zephyrs and they've all asked me questions and I've helped them enough. And everybody's had good flights so far. Did not document the Baja Blast Off because I was running out of time, and I did the whole build in like 2-3 days, and I was rushing to get it done, barely got it done. Anybody who sat that launch day with me knows I was having a rough day that day. But I did fly it, and I did recover it successfully, so it was a productive build, at least. But with the Darkstar here, it is obviously a much bigger rocket, but it's also my first fiberglass kit, and I'm the, to my knowledge, second person in the club to do a fiberglass personal rocket. We launched our Dunmire 100, which was a vertical assault fiberglass kit, and we built that as a club. But the only other person to have done a fiberglass build so far has been one of my friends. He was the first person in the club to get his L2, and he did a Punisher. He loves that thing. He'll fly it any chance he gets, and has already capped it out at our local waiver of 10,000 feet, which is pretty low, I know, but he's already capped it out, so I know he's excited for once he can take that thing higher. But he did a pretty good job at documenting it, his build process, but I'm hoping to sort of expand upon it with this rocket. He was trying to sell me on a Punisher, and I liked it, but the Punisher is kind of short, especially compared to this rocket. This rocket's really tall, but it was a lot more sort of short, like the Zephyr that I did for my L1, and I was hoping for something tall and impressive. And the Darkstar is definitely tall and impressive, 84 inches in height with how I have the motor retainer set up right now. Really, really sick rocket. I'm super happy with it. As well as its standard dual deploy instead of head-end dual deploy, which is just a little bit different. I'll end up doing a head-end dual deploy at some point. I think I know which rocket that one's going to be, but I'm going to save that for a later time. But I digress. The main goal with documenting this is that online there are good resources on the Darkstar build. I'm following one of those guides, which I will link in the description of this video. But I just want to get my own information and my own build process out there so people can look at me and go, haha, that guy messed it up. And that's really what I'm looking forward to, is figuring this all out and having an example, so that way, especially the other people in the same club, they can watch the build process, because I'm imagining this is probably going to be a pretty standard 3-inch fiberglass build for an L2 rocket. So for everybody to come who wants to do their L2 in a more traditional sense, they aren't going for just a big fat 6-inch rocket that isn't going to go very high. You've seen that. It's fun, but it's not what I'm hoping for. So once I have this all set up, the next step, now that I have the fins in place for a dry fit and I have the retainer on, is I'm going to be taking the forwardmost centering ring and carving a notch into it, so that way I can insert my shot cord, the end of it, down through the centering ring and epoxy that to the motor mount tube. And that's going to be my attachment point. I don't have a Kevlar harness or anything. I'm just going to do a direct weld. I feel like it should work just fine for me. So that's my plan. And yeah, before I ramble too much, let's cut to that. All right, so what I've done is I've taken the motor mount tube out of the fin can here, and I measured out with the fins roughly where each of the center rings will go. You can see I have a mark, and those two marks are the top and bottom of the center ring. So one mark there, one mark there. And I have two marks for each centering ring, one on this front side and then another on the back side, because the rings tend to sort of tilt back and forth on the tube, and that makes it just a little bit easier to level them out. It's not perfect. 3 would probably be better, but 2 is going to be good enough because they wind up straight once they're in the tube anyways. And so I just took measurements based off of the root of the fin here, and well, it's not perfect, it is pretty good. And what I've also done is I've numbered the centering rings from most forward to most aft. And so the next step is I'm going to take this forward centering ring and I'm going to carve a small notch into the side of it on the inside here, so that way I can fit my shock cord down into it, and then I will epoxy the shock cord onto the motor mount tube. Gonna try and keep that as narrow as possible, so that way once the fins go down in there, they can sit on either side. So the fins try and sit on top of the shock cord. They're just not going to fit right, and it might be weaker, but mostly they're just not going to fit right, and that's what I don't want. So I have the shock cord right here, carabiner. So I've taken the shock cord out of the factory package, or the packaging that I bought it in, and I flaked it out so that way it's pretty straight. I have the middle roughly here with the tag still on it, so 3 loops, 1/4 inch. I just remember off the top of my head it's 25 feet. I have marked with an F on both sides, as well as this Sharpie, that this end is the forward end, as this is the end that has the loop on it. I've also separated out the loop by putting the carabiner through it rather than just having it in the bundle. So you can see as I draw this in, that this is the end that the loop is on. So that gives me confidence in that this will work out, because what I read online is that you want the drogue parachute, because this will be for the drogue, which has the loop on it, is that you want the drogue to be off of the loop and off of the avionics bay, with the fins much lower down, which is why there's 18 feet or 23 feet of shock cord beneath it, so the fins can be down out of the way. That way the nose cone and the forward body tube is able to deploy, and the main parachute will be above the fins when it comes out. I also don't want it to be in the middle, otherwise the two parts would sort of clang into each other on the way back down. We want for the parts to sort of separate out and spin. So on top of having this loop here for the parachute, I may also add in a swivel, which can be hard because this is a sewn loop, so I might just not. And I'll probably just leave it attached, as it should be all right. Yeah, that's the plan, is to take the center ring, make a notch for the shock cord to sort of lay down into it. I'll be using a file. It's fairly high grit. I don't think it'll chunk and rip out the fiberglass too bad, but if I don't like what I'm seeing, I'll probably just grab like a Dremel with a much finer bit and sand it down that way. So that's the plan going forwards for these parts. All right, I was able to get the sanding or the filing done for this little centering ring. It's fairly clean, but what matters is the right size. I just did it with the sides of the file and did sort of 2 similar and overlapping passes. I should do it outside, and I do have a respirator and glasses because it was a lot of fiberglass dust that it was kicking up. But as you can see here, if I can get it, the shock cord fits pretty well down right into that little notch. And what's more important, let's see if I can get it in one hand, is that the shock cord fits through that, so once I'm ready, I'll be able to put that into place, and then based on the guide that I'm following, this will be the first centering ring that I put on, and I'll epoxy the shock cord and put the internal fillets on this centering ring, and then let it cure, and then the main motor mount tube will slide on from there. So that's next.